Good morning and welcome back to our Fusion 360 class tutorials for beginner woodworkers. We're actually going to be doing something that is not really seen as a beginner project, but I have been asked about it quite a number of times since I designed a much more complex version of this and posted it to several groups that I am a part of that focus on Kumiko and woodworking techniques. Anyway, I wanted to come up with a much simpler version that I think beginners might be able to do, both from a modeling perspective and to actually be able to go out into the shop and build it. So as you can see up here at the top, we are going to be building a Kumiko chessboard. The way that I have done this in the past is to use liquid resin to fill in the Kumiko, which actually is a fairly advanced process, and to use very elaborate Kumiko to decorate it. We're going to do something that is a little simpler today. Now, we are modeling here in the standard Fusion 360 environment. If you have the free version, it will look pretty much just like this, and we're not using any of the features that have to have the paid or the academic versions, so you don't need to worry about any of that. And in all our classes, we are using only the free features. So go and get yourself a free copy of Fusion 360, and it will do everything we're doing here. So we're going to start by modeling. When it comes to something like a chessboard, it doesn't matter if you're modeling from the side or modeling from the top, but if you want to turn it into an actual cabinet at some point in time, it's probably best to model from the top because that's where you're going to be seeing the thing. So we're going to start by drawing a center point rectangle, and because a chessboard is square, we're going to make the two sides equal, and it is a center point square. Now, we don't need to worry about how big this rectangle is. We're just going to draw another one for our dividing lines. Now you're going to think that we might need a horizontal one and a vertical one, and then we'll make them the same and all that. It's actually a little simpler than that. We're just going to click on our dimension tool here. Dimension this to be 2 millimeters. We're modeling in millimeters today. I apologize to our American friends, but most of these we've done in inches, and when it comes to Kumiko being a Japanese traditional art form, to a certain extent. Japan is a metric country and has been for, well, a very long time, 100 years or so, give or take. And before that, it wasn't an imperial measurement system. It was a different traditional system, which Fusion 360 probably does not like very much. Not to mention, I don't think anybody in Japan is probably likely to be measuring these pieces in the traditional measuring system because it is a little awkward. So we have this 2 millimeter piece here. What I am going to do with that 2 millimeter piece is I am going to flip it mirrored. So I will pick our 4 sides by double clicking on it. I will say that I want to mirror it across this 45-degree dividing line that comes with the center point rectangle. And I will say OK. And now we have a horizontal and vertical piece. And each of those is exactly the same. Now, I want to take these two outside lines and create a rectangular pattern. We're going to move it left and right. We will make it symmetrical, and we're going to say that there are 82 millimeters between each of them. We want there to be a quantity of 9 because we need 8 spaces, and hit OK. Now I'm going to do the same thing, say repeat rectangular pattern. Don't need to worry about the fact that it's gone outside our grid. We are going to modify our grid in a second. Now I will select those 2 lines. I will move them up. We will change this to be 9 of them. They are going to be symmetrical, and again, they will be 82 millimeters apart. You can make that a variable and set that, but it doesn't really matter. And now the only thing that we want to do is we want to say that the outside line of our outermost piece is the same as the outside line of our square. And now you can see we have an 8 by 8 grid, and that will work out just fine. That's it. That's all we need we give 1 dimension here and say finish sketch. All right, now we're going to take that and we're going to extrude it. You can hit Q or click on this, you can hit extrude. I'm going to select the whole thing. There is, unfortunately, no easy way to select all the lines, but not all the squares. I wish there was. But it will only take me a minute to go in and do this. Now, I could actually know the dimension on all these squares beforehand. And I could go through and make only one dividing line, copy the dividing line across the mirror face the way that I did in the sketch, and I wouldn't have to go through this particular step. The reason I choose to do it this way rather than modeling one piece and mirroring and copying that is that if I do that, I will have to go back and forth in time or know the dimension in advance. Practically speaking, you probably will know the dimension, but that isn't necessarily the case. What I really want it to be based on is the dimension of these individual squares, that they're going to be 82 millimeters separated. If I want it to be based on that, and I don't want to have to do all the complex math that comes along with it, I can do this, and as you can see, it took me about 30 seconds. So I'm going to make this 7 millimeters thick and say a new component. We're going to go over here and call this new component, double-clicking, we're going to call this new component grid. My computer's being a bit slow today. It just did an update, and I don't think it likes it very much. So we have our grid. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create right away another sketch on that same plane. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to hit P for project. So I'm going to copy the dimensions. I will select our grid, and now I have all the individual intersection points from the grid, and that is great. So I will go to our line tool, hit X to make it a guide rather than a real line, and I will draw corner to corner and center to edge. So we have a nice center point, and we have mirrored dividing lines. And I'll do that in these top two squares. I won't do it for all the squares, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two Kumiko patterns. One for our dark squares and one for our light squares. They're not actually going to be light and dark in this model, but that's what we're going to be doing. Now, I'm going to say I want a curve, and my curve is going to go from this line to this line. Seems all right. I'm going to make that curve there. Now you can see it's going right to the center of this piece here, and I'm going to give it a dimension. It is going to be 21 millimeters from that edge. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give the curve itself a radius, and I will say it's 65 millimeters radius. Now keep that 65 in mind. It's not 65 degrees, it's that it is a 65 millimeter radius circle. The reason I want you to keep that in mind is because we're going to use that in both here, so we only have to be able to make pieces with one radius, and that will save quite a bit of time in construction. In the modeling, it doesn't really make any difference. I can just type in a new number. But if you're going to actually make a jig to make these round pieces, having them exactly the same radius will save you a lot of time in making them. Now, because Kumiko actually has a thickness, I'm going to draw two more curves. One curve and two curves. That curve, where it is, doesn't matter, and I will select both of them, hit X, and toggle them back to be regular. I will make them concentric by using our concentric constraint here. I'm going to take one and drag it back, and one and drag it a bit closer. And now I am going to give it a dimension between these two lines of 1 millimeter. I'm going to give the outside one the same dimension, but I'm just going to click on it here. Because if I click on it and I ever have to change one, I just change the first one. And we're going to be using this 1 millimeter dimension all the way through because all our Kumiko pieces are 2 millimeters thick. Now, I could draw that again, but what I'm really going to do is I will pick the two outside curves, 1 and 2. If you can't select something, just zoom in. I will say circular pattern, and I will click on this center point. Now, I don't want 3 of them. That would be a neat effect, but I actually want 4 because we're going around in a square. You can scroll down or up and put that in, and that's pretty good. I think that looks like a great little pattern, but I want to make sure that it is distinctive from the other one we're going to create. The other one we're going to create has an outside set of curves and an inside set of curved squares. This one has an outside set of curved squares, and what we're going to do is we're going to make an inside circle. I will draw that. I will turn it into a regular line by hitting X, and I'm going to make it tangent to any of these. If you make it tangent to any of them, it will be tangent to all of them. I will click on it, say modify, offset, and make it 2 millimeters offset. Now you can see it's making it 2 millimeters offset to the outside. If we say flip, it will go to the inside, and again we click on it, hit X, and turn it into a real line. The reason we don't do that with these curves is that if you offset the one to the outside, it actually won't connect to the outside line, and you'll have to modify it later. So it's easier just to draw a few extra curves. All right, we're going to leave it at that. I could make this hugely more complicated, but I think that will do it for now. If you want to take that and make some more interesting lines in it, that would be fine too. I'm just going to drag this 2 millimeter number out here. You can always drag around your dimensions to make it so you can read them all, and I think that makes it a little easier to see for if you ever wanted to create this again. We're going to go to this second one here, and we're going to start by drawing from this line out here to the center point of this edge. Center point of this edge. And we will draw that. This is again going to be a guide line. And we will hit that line, dimension, and we're going to make that dimension exactly the same as this 65 over here, and hit OK. Goes a bit out there, but we will drag it back in so we don't get confused. And I will do exactly the same thing that we just did. I'm just going to turn off the guide drawing here. Draw from one side. Draw from the other side. And I will make those, again, concentric. One to this one, and to that one. I'll drag one of them back over here. It doesn't matter which one's inside and which one's outside because they're all concentric, which means they all follow the same curved path. Now, if I say dimension again, from the inside to the outside of that is 1 millimeter. So I will copy that 1 millimeter again, so I don't type it in. When in doubt, always try to copy the dimensions from somewhere else because you only ever want to have to modify something once. Say you wanted to change all the dimensions of this to be 3 millimeter Kumiko. Well, you'd only have to change this one to be 3 and this one to be 1.5, and all the rest would shift for you. Now, if I say create circular pattern, and I pick those two outside curves, I pick my center point, and I change it to be 4, so we have one for each corner. And I think we're doing pretty well on that. Now, the only other thing that we want to do is we're going to create one more linking curve, and we are going to create that linking curve from the center point to the center point. What we're going to do with that is we will give it a dimension. We'll call it 40. It has moved over. Well, I don't really want to have to deal with it doing that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create some extra guide lines. Fusion has an odd time sometimes calculating center points. And rather than mess with its glitches, which it has far too many of for my liking, I'm actually just going to create guide lines. I'm going to draw from this center point to this center point, and I will drag it out so it is actually going to be tangent. I'm just going to make sure it is tangent to both of these lines, which it is now by using this tangent here. You can always click constraints and pick it if you can't tell what it is from the symbol. It's particularly bad with this equal and parallel. Sometimes it's easy to get those two confused. All right, so I'm going to click on that one, and I am going to hit O for offset. I can also hit modify offset. And I'm going to create an offset that is 1 millimeter in this direction. And I'm going to do the same thing and say offset in the other direction. The reason we can do that we couldn't do for these ones is that they're starting from well inside the line, and the fact that it is shifted slightly in both directions, as you can see, slightly above and slightly below because of the length, doesn't matter because they are going to overlap, and Fusion will give us the overlap rather than the total length. I will select both sides and say circular pattern. We will rotate these around the center line, and again, we want 4 because we are making square grid Kumiko. That works quite well, I do believe. And that, I think, is pretty much everything we need for our piece here today. So we will say finish sketch. I know it doesn't show them as being fully defined, and there is a reason for that, but I'm not particularly worried about it. When you are doing these infill pieces, as long as you get all the dimensions, the fact that Fusion doesn't know they are fully defined makes no difference at all. So I am going to say, I could do each of these infill pieces individually, and if you want to do that, you can certainly go ahead. If you're going to be doing them all from the same wood, though, which we are today, you don't really need to worry about that. So I am going to select all these pieces of the first one, and I'm going to say new component. Instead of distance, we will say toObject, and we will make them as thick as the grid. And hit OK. Now, if I turn on that sketch again, sketch number 2, I'm going to call this infill. You can call it anything you want, of course. These names don't make any difference. We will say extrude. And we will pick all the pieces, again, of our infill for this. It is a little tedious sometimes, and my mouse work is not nearly as precise as it should be. All right, and we will say toObject. We could have done both these at the same time, and that would have been fine as well. But we're going to say new body, and we're going to drag that body into our infill component. Remember, a component is more like a file folder, and the bodies are like sheets of paper. So now you can see there is a distinct difference between one pattern and the other, but they actually link up in a sort of a manner. The angles are not right in terms of the linking, but I think that actually adds to the fact that you can see they are distinct rather than continued. So if I hit appearance, what we're going to do is we're just going to make these look somewhat different. If you were going to make this from actual wood, what I would suggest is that you use 2 different woods for these and another one for the outside pattern. What we're going to do is we're going to make the outside grid from ash. We're going to use cherry for one of these pieces, and we're going to use walnut for the other. And I think that would give us quite a nice difference between which ones are going to be traditionally light and which ones traditionally dark. If you did more infill in one and more in the other, it would be more obvious, but I think we are doing well keeping things quite simple today. So what I want to do is I'm going to rotate these around a center the way that I did for the actual infill pieces, but we need to have a center. So I'm going to say construct a plane through 2 edges. I'm going to go through the 2 edges of this dividing piece. I'll repeat that and do it for the inside edges of the same corner. So what we're doing is we're creating a center point to rotate things around. And if we zoom in, we can see that we have this center point, which is right between these 2 lines. Now to tell it that's a center point, I'm going to say an axis through 2 planes. And all I need to do is pick those 2 planes, and now I have an axis. What direction it is doesn't matter because we're going to be using it as a rotation point. And now I will say create pattern, circular pattern, and pick these 2 bodies. Make sure it is selecting bodies, not components or faces, or features for that matter, and I will pick this center line. Now it wants to do 3, but we actually just want 2, because I don't want to overlap them, I just want the same 2 spaced again. Now we're definitely starting to get somewhere. If I say create pattern, rectangular pattern, and pick all 4 of these, all I need to do is select my directions. If I select a direction on this plane and I drag them over, I want 4 of those. And given that we were doing 82 2 mm spacing for our grid. We want to have one every 2 grid spaces, which will be 164 millimeters. We're going to drag the other one down, do the same thing for, and you can type it in over here, 164 millimeters. And you can see they all now line up. So I will say, OK. And we now have a chessboard pattern of alternating Kumiko squares. Now, if you want to do this with the hemp leaf, if you want to do this with the traditional cherry blossom pattern, that's totally fine. You could have hemp leaf, cherry, and it would be just the same procedure. I'm doing it with this because it gives me an opportunity to share 2 other Kumiko patterns I have already done videos on some of the traditional ones for this series, like the hemp leaf. So you already know how to model that. Now you know how to model this one, which this one I call the inset ring, and this one here I call the stoned eye. There are other names you can put on them. They are not traditional, so there are no traditional names. I don't really think the traditional names matter too much, but I do like the fact that one is called hemp, one is called plum, one is called cherry. You can definitely see the shapes in those. So what we have here is a chessboard, but you can't play chess on it. There's 2 reasons you can't play chess on it. One is you need the rest of the board. You need the surface. Because if you put pieces on this, they'll just fall right through because these are actually empty space. The second is we don't have any chess pieces. We're going to fix one of those in this video, and we're going to come back to this series in a little while, and I'm going to fix the other one. The first one that we're going to fix today is that we're going to create a surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to model yet again on that same plane, and I am going to hit P for project, but instead of projecting all the geometry, I'm just going to project these outside lines. Have to scroll in a little to pick it, scroll out, move down, and I'm going to pick this outside line too. So now I have those 4 outside lines. That is the boundary box for the outside of our grid. What I'll do is I'll create a center point rectangle and go out, and we're going to create a 60 millimeter border all the way around, 60 millimeters. And I will say that the outsides are equal and it is a square. We just need one more thing here. I want to have a piece that is inset, so I will create center point rectangle, which is a center point square because I have put it on this dividing line here. And I'm going to say that the spacing from the outside of that to the inside is going to be 14 millimeters. I will say finish sketch, and I am going to pick that rectangle plus the smaller of the outside ones. I'm going to say this is going to be 3 millimeters thick, and we are going to zoom in. Now, instead of starting from the profile plane, I'm going to select from an object, which is the top of our Kumiko pieces. I just need to scroll in so I can pick it. Not sure why it is not letting me pick this piece. There we go. Let's just get rid of this dimension for the moment. Say new component. We'll scroll up. It's still getting in the way. So I am going to pick this outside piece. I am going to say 3 millimeters. New component. From the object, and I will scroll in and I will pick this top piece, which it is being really twitchy about letting me pick. I'll scroll way in and pick that top piece. So now we're going to be going 3 millimeters up from that top edge. And I am going to go up here and select both the outside and the inside, and it will now let me do that. And you can see it's actually covering the top piece here. Is it covering? Yes, it is covering that top piece. It's sitting right on top. Now, what do I actually want to do with that? I'll go back to appearance, and instead of making that from wood, I'm going to make that from glass. smooth glass, and we're going to say it is clear. I'll just drag it right onto that component and hit OK or close. I'm going to say that's the glass top. That's pretty good. I think that worked out quite well. Now, the other thing that I want to do is I want to create a little filler ring. So I will hit this sketch, make it appear again, and I am going to select just that outside rectangle, which we are going to bond on. We will say distance to object. We will go up and pick our object. I'll turn the sketch off to make it easier. We're going to pick the bottom edge of our glass piece. And we will say new component again. I'll turn the sketch back on. And I will select both the outside pieces. And we are going to say two sides. Now, the depth that we are going to have for the second side, we are going to make it 8 millimeters. And say OK. So what we have now done is we have cut this wooden piece all the way up through. But did I pick the bottom edge? Oops, my bad. What I actually want to do is pick the top edge to object 1. We will pick the top edge of that glass piece. And we're going to go beyond the top edge of the glass piece 3 millimeters. And hit OK. So what we've actually done is we've gone right through our glass piece. We've covered it over, which is a little problem if you're making it from glass, because the glass isn't going to like that. But we're going to hit Combine. We're going to cut out this outside piece with the glass and hit OK. And now what we actually have is a little rabbit, or a little groove in this case, right through. Now, it doesn't fill all the way to the bottom, but we're going to fix that now by hitting our extrude function. We're going to select that glass, and we're going to cut right through to the bottom. Did I select the wrong piece? Yes, I did. All right, so I will turn off the infill. I will turn off this component. I will turn off the grid, and I will pick the inside edge. We're going to go all the way down here. We'll turn back on our component 4. And we are going to say cut. As you can see now, we have cut a rabbit for our glass piece and our Kumiko. Turn the glass on, turn the infill on, turn the grid on, and now we have that piece. So our glass is sitting inside. The only thing that I want to do now beyond that is to put a filler piece in the bottom. So I'll turn off the grid and the infill again. I will select the bottom of the glass. We're going to go right to the object that is on the bottom, and we will say New Component, and say OK. So now I have below the glass, you can see it, under the glass, I have this filler piece, which is great. I will edit that feature and make sure that we are going offset 7 millimeters to leave some space between the glass and the infill. So if you turn the infill on, turn the grid on, what we have now is that there is the infill and the grid between the glass and that back filler. If I say A for appearance, again, what I need to do is go in and find the fabric, the white fabric, and I will change the backing of that piece to white. That doesn't look very white. Let's see, do we have a white cloth in here? Let's say use this black fabric. I will edit it. And I don't know, is it going to allow me to use white? No. Oh, there really needs to be a better fabric for this. We'll just say white fabric for the moment. I wonder if there's something else. Miscellaneous. White paper. That should be a bit brighter. Anything that you're going to put behind your Kumiko should, if the Kumiko pieces are very dark, like this, be quite light, and if the Kumiko pieces are very light, it should probably be quite dark. We're using this ash border to offset all these dark pieces. If you were going to make them light, I'd probably use a dark border like walnut or maybe a stain. Maybe if I was going to do that, I would actually use something like Paduk or Wenge or even ebony. Well, that's a lot of ebony, but I think you get the idea. Anyway, that is our board, our chessboard, with the inlaid Kumiko. And next time, what we're actually going to do is draw some chess pieces, some modern chess pieces that are loosely based on Kumiko grid patterns. We'll just give these some names. This is going to be our frame, and this is going to be our backer. We've actually made this whole thing from this paper texture. You could make it from any texture you want, and you can actually change it, of course, if you were making it in real life, to have just one face that was something and have wood on the bottom. You could put fabric in here, which is probably what I would actually do, or you could put plastic behind it, and that would give you a nice shiny perspective. One thing that I have done for chessboards in the past, though not an inlaid chessboard like this, but it would work, is to put a mirror behind it, and that would give a really nice effect too. So, if you have found this to be useful or enjoyed it in any way, please click on that like button. Share and subscribe if you will. If there are any things that you are curious about or anything you didn't like, feel free to stick a comment down below and ask any questions. We're always happy to help. So, that is us for the moment. We will be back next time modeling something else in Fusion 360, and stay tuned in the next few weeks because the next episode in this series we are going to finish our chess game by making some pieces for you. Okay, have a great day modeling and working in your shop. See you next time.